Tonight, Donald Trump disinvites Canada from the Board of Peace. What he wrote in a post late tonight as the two countries continue to spar over what was said in Davos.
Canada doesn't live because of the United States. Canada thrives because we are Canadian.
All I gotta do is listen to this guy whine and complain.
And the new U.S. warning ahead of upcoming trade talks. How Canadian veterans are responding to Trump's controversial comments about NATO soldiers on the battlefield.
They'll say they sent some troops to Afghanistan or this or that. And they did. They stayed a little back, a little off the front lines.
Plus, Canada versus Hollywood heavyweights.
It's really validating for us as animation directors.
The top contenders chasing their golden Oscar moment.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening. The clash between the Prime Minister and the U.S. President has deepened tonight with a fresh blow. Donald Trump posting this letter to Mark Carney this evening, withdrawing his invitation to join the Board of Peace on the future of Gaza, calling it the most prestigious board of leaders ever assembled. Canada previously said it would join in principle, but not pay the billion-dollar fee for permanent membership. And now back at home, Carney took his own shot at Trump. CTV's Abigail Beeman starts us off.
Mark Carney gets friendly with Quebec City's famous snowman mascot, Bonhomme, but won't answer questions about the state of affairs with a less friendly partner, the United States. The Prime Minister gathers his cabinet after a global tour that saw a controversial new trade deal with China and a speech at the World Economic Forum that was widely lauded, except by Donald Trump.
Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that.
But Canada doesn't live because of the United States. Canada thrives because we are Canadian.
A direct swipe back during an address with a more domestic focus on Canadian values and identity and the government's already announced agenda.
Now we need to execute fairly and fast.
The economy was the focus of day one cabinet meetings.
We're talking about affordability. We're talking about building Canada strong. We're talking about our sovereignty.
Ministers briefed by a number of special guests.
It's a huge responsibility to bring these voices to government, but what we're seeing is also a crisis. 2.2 million visits to food banks every single month.
If ministers are talking about the upcoming review of CUSMA, the North American Free Trade Deal, they aren't sharing updates publicly. Cabinet meetings continue here Friday inside the fortress that was once built for a feared attack that never came from the United States. Omar?
All right, Abigail, thank you. Well, as Abigail mentioned, the Prime Minister focused his speech today on the need to protect Canadian values of diversity, pluralism, and inclusivity ahead of that cabinet retreat in Quebec City.
I said we had to do two things. First is to be a bastion. The second is to be a beacon. An example to a world that's at sea.
And joining us now is CTV's chief political correspondent, Vassy Kapelos. Vassy, the Prime Minister's speech today tried to encapsulate the values that, in his view, define Canada and ought to drive it going forward, almost at times sounding like a coach preparing the team for a big game. What's he preparing Canadians for, and why make this kind of speech now?
Well, I had the impression, Omar, that he was essentially preparing Canadians for a protracted fight with the United States from, at the very least, an economic perspective, and kind of priming the ground for what that will continue to mean for our economy and for our own livelihoods. I think that felt like the impetus for the speech, and also a desire to connect, I think, what had a lot of resonance in Davos with what's happening in this country. Now, the question of why now is a really interesting one, insofar as I think it bridges it all together. It felt less like, here are the policies I'm going to do, in relation to that thing that I just laid out that we're up against. It was more of really honestly felt like a campaign speech more than anything else. It felt like the positioning was one that was of a more political than policy nature. Now, whether that translates to an election is, of course, a very different question, but I think it heightened the possibility this year of one. Omar?
All right, Vassy, thank you. The leader of the opposition weighed in on the Prime Minister's speech in Davos today, calling it, quote, well-crafted and eloquently delivered. But he went on to say this.
What stood out most to me was when he pointed out, quote, the gaps between rhetoric and reality. That's especially true here at home. If liberal words and good intentions were tradable commodities, Canada would already be the richest nation on earth.
Meanwhile, the criticism from the U.S. today was more blunt.
Give me a break. They have the second best deal in the world. And all I got to do is listen to this guy whine and complain?
That's Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick calling the Prime Minister's Davos speech political noise and issuing this warning ahead of the CUSMA review in July.
Do you think the President of the United States is going to say, you should keep having the second best deal in the world? I mean, you guys are such great friends. 85% of the Canadian economy comes into the United States for zero. They have the second best deal because Mexico's got a little better deal. They have 25% on the extra 15%, whereas Canada's got 35% on the extra 15%.
Canada's finance minister pushed back.
Prime Minister said a lot of things that people thought, and he had the courage to say it loud.
Donald Trump has arrived back in the U.S. tonight, but told reporters on Air Force One that more details on the framework of a future deal over Greenland are coming in 2 weeks. CTV's Judy Trin looks at what we know so far and what it could mean for Canada.
The framework for negotiating the future of Greenland was drafted by the U.S. President and NATO's Secretary General.
We can do anything we want. We can do military. We can do anything we want. And it's being negotiated, and let's see what happens. I think it'll be good.
It could include more American bases and troops and drilling rights to critical minerals, all to prevent Russia and China from gaining a foothold in the Arctic.
When it comes to Greenland specifically, their economy, their military situation, Russia and China will never get access.
Denmark and the semi-autonomous territory of Greenland weren't part of the discussions and won't give up their sovereignty.
We have some clear red lines, what's been delivered to the president, and nothing about a deal on mineral resources or anything else. But that's something, the further discussions that we are willing to take.
The framework involves boosting security for the entire region by the 7 NATO allies in the Arctic Circle. After his meeting with the NATO chief, Prime Minister Mark Carney reiterated that Canada planned to quadruple defense spending over the next decade and invest in the Arctic with new radar technology and more soldiers on land, sea, and air. Military analysts say after Greenland, Trump could target Canada next.
We're seeing the playbook played out right in front of our eyes here, and this is what we should expect to happen in Canada.
Carney's plan to quadruple military investments will cost about $150 billion annually, a steep price to defend sovereignty. Omar.
All right, Judy, thank you. And Ukraine's president spoke in Davos today, voicing harsh criticism of Europe's response to Russian aggression and also the fight over Greenland.
If you send 30 or 40 soldiers to Greenland, what is that for? What message does it send?
Volodymyr Zelensky went on to call Europe a fragmented kaleidoscope of small and middle powers, saying that it needs to show more courage. Also in Davos today, Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, unveiled the so-called master plan for the future of Gaza.
Rockville will start with. This will show a lot of workforce housing. We think this could be done in 2-3 years. We've already started removing the rubble and doing some of the demolition. And then New Gaza. It could be a hope. It could be a destination, have a lot of industry.
That plan in stark contrast to the situation on the ground. Despite the ceasefire in place, there have been repeated violations. Palestinian officials say 5 people were killed by Israeli forces in Gaza today. Israel has yet to comment. Some Canadian veterans are expressing outrage tonight, angered by a comment by the U.S. president. CTV's BC Bureau Chief Andrew Johnson with their response to a message they see as disparaging.
Bruce Moncourt was seriously injured in Afghanistan in 2006, and after listening to the U.S. president today, he felt
enraged.
Moncourt is shaking his head at this comment from the U.S. president on Fox News, downplaying the contribution from NATO allies, including Canada.
We've never needed them. We have never really asked anything of them. You know, they'll say they sent some troops to Afghanistan or this or that. And they did. They stayed a little back, a little off the front lines.
I know 13 people that were killed in Afghanistan fighting. I know another 13 that have killed themselves from their time fighting there.
40,000 Canadians served in Afghanistan, the largest deployment of our troops since the Second World War. 158 were killed. Moncourt was wounded when his platoon was mistakenly hit by friendly fire from U.S. troops.
I had to have 5% of my brain removed. I had to relearn how to read, write, walk, talk, and effectively ended my military career.
Trevor Street served 2 tours for Canada and says Trump's comment that NATO allies stayed back from the front lines speaks to his ignorance.
There was no front line. That was literally the entire problem. If there'd been some sort of World War I-esque front line in Afghanistan, I mean, we would have been out of there in a month.
There is also plenty of outrage online where people are posting photos like this one captioned, "Canadian soldiers leaving Afghanistan in 2006 after doing nothing."
Street wants to use the attention Trump's put on veterans to good use to call for federal funding for the Veterans Transition Network. It provides housing and counseling for the veterans who did so much in Afghanistan and beyond. Andrew Johnson, CTV News, Vancouver.
It's an image that has left people shaken. A 5-year-old boy being taken into custody this week by ICE agents in Minneapolis as they rounded up his father. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbon on the incident, further igniting tensions.
His name is Liam Ramos. He's 5 years old. Wearing a blue bunny hat, he attends a preschool in Minnesota. His teachers say he was rounded up by ICE agents. According to lawyers, he's now in detention with his father in Texas. Liam is just one of 4 children detained by ICE agents in the last 2 weeks from the same school district.
He's a bright young student. All I want is for him to be safe and back here.
The raids are part of President Donald Trump's hardline crackdown on immigration. He promised to go after the worst of the worst and deport them.
They're murderers, they're drug lords.
Liam is not a violent offender. The family lawyer says he was used as bait to lure other people from their home. The family is applying for asylum, but instead of leaving Liam with relatives, ICE agents put him in detention.
ICE detained a 5-year-old. Well, what are they supposed to do? Are they supposed to let a 5-year-old child freeze to death?
The vice president in Minneapolis trying to lower the temperature after 2 weeks of unrest. The ICE raids have ripped Minneapolis apart with more agents than police on the streets. Tensions are high after the fatal shooting of Renee Good by an ICE officer. Minnesota's governor and mayor don't want them there, now under criminal investigation for possible obstruction. For the teachers at Columbia Heights, now missing a little boy, this is inexcusable.
ICE agents have been roaming our neighborhoods, circling our schools, following our buses, coming into our parking lots and taking our children, and our hearts are shattered.
Joy Malbon, CTV News, Washington.
Coming up, digging into an unsolved mystery.
He couldn't explain to me how he got from the door to laying on the floor next to her.
What the Canadian man accused of killing his girlfriend on vacation is sharing and not sharing tonight. A warning, this next story is graphic and disturbing. A Canadian man at the center of a murder mystery is making his first public statements about the beating death of his 23-year-old girlfriend in Mexico. Amid Canada-wide protests over the verdict, the case is now being reviewed. And as W5's Avery Haynes explains in this exclusive, the BC man maintains his innocence.
Ryan Friesen is back living in Dawson Creek, British Columbia. He's refused repeated requests for an interview, but in a statement writes, "My desire for justice is unwavering, and I hope that those truly responsible are identified and held fully accountable for their actions." March 3, 2023, Kiera Agnew was beaten to death on a 5-star resort in Playa del Carmen. Friesen was found asleep beside her body in a resort laundry room. At his judge-only trial in 2024, he was found not guilty, based on the fact Friesen's DNA was not found under Kiera's fingernails, while unknown DNA was present, and the belief that her injuries were too severe to have been inflicted by one person. In his statement, Friesen writes, "Legal proceedings against me have unfortunately impeded the investigation to find the actual perpetrators." In Dawson Creek last summer, more than 2 years after Kiera was killed, Friesen met with some of her family members, including her stepfather, Ricky.
Everybody was harassing him, and He wanted to basically sway us in his direction that he was innocent and he wants his life back.
Ricky says Ryan claimed he and Kira had been drinking at the resort bar, went back to their room, got into an argument, and that he fell asleep.
And he woke up a couple of hours later and said that Kira was missing. Then he said that he left the hotel room and he heard her screaming.
He says Ryan claimed to have followed the sounds of her scream to a laundry room, that he beat on the door, which was locked.
He said that somebody opened the door. And he said that she was sitting there on the floor and holding her private, saying that she was raped. And he said that there was 3 to 4 people in the room.
And what was his explanation for being found asleep next to her dead body?
He couldn't explain to me how he got from the door to laying on the floor next to her, and he wouldn't answer me that question. I asked 3 times.
Some of Kira's diary entries and photographs document previous abuse, allegedly at the hands of Friesen.
Whoever committed this horrible act on this poor 23-year-old woman had a lot of rage.
Dave Perry, chairman of Investigative Solutions Network, is a former Toronto homicide investigator, an expert on violent crime and murder.
I noticed on all of his fingernails, they were just soaked up in the ridges here.
He doesn't have access to all the evidence in the case, but analyzed Kira's autopsy and Ryan's police processing photos.
All of her injuries are, supportive of somebody that was beaten horribly, and his injuries would match that kind of an attack.
In his statement, Ryan Friesen says, "My desire for justice is not about me. It is and always has been about Kira." The not guilty verdict is currently being reviewed by a magistrate in Mexico and could be overturned, upheld, or modified. Avery Haynes, CTV News. And coming up tomorrow, Avery asks a Mexican cartel whether it was involved in the killing. Switching gears coming up. How this buck gave police officers a run for their money. A brutal cold snap is currently gripping parts of Canada with a bitterly frigid weekend coming up. Extreme wind chills are pounding the prairies. Chunks of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba are dealing with values varying between -40 and -50 degrees. Ontario, Quebec, and Atlantic Canada are also bracing for temperatures to plunge into a deep freeze over the next few days, followed by heavy snow in some parts. A chilling prospect from a now shuttered theme park in Niagara Falls, Ontario. Marineland says it will be forced to euthanize dozens of beluga whales unless Ottawa steps in. CTV's John Venavelli-Rao with what it wants the government to authorize.
The future of these belugas has long been uncertain, stuck in a shuttered theme park that closed 17 months ago. Now Marineland wants to ship them to the States and reportedly making backup plans to euthanize them if Ottawa says no.
I think it could very well be the best place for these animals to go, but I think it's so wrong that Marineland is holding the government hostage.
In what's being called an urgent rescue proposal, Marineland's 30 remaining belugas and 4 dolphins will reportedly be sent to aquariums in Orlando, Atlanta, Chicago, and Stonington, Connecticut. Marineland has said it can't afford to look after the whales and wants to sell the property. Last year, it pitched transferring them to an aquarium in China, but Ottawa denied that request.
You want to send them to a place where there's accountability. The original proposal to send the whales to China didn't address that. This new proposal does.
Some had hoped they could be moved to a proposed seaside sanctuary in Nova Scotia, but it has yet to raise the millions it needs to open. In a statement, the Fisheries Minister's office confirmed the minister was presented with new export permit applications and that the minister will review them expeditiously. 20 whales have died at Marineland since 2019, and experts say sending them to multiple aquariums in the U.S. is hardly a perfect solution.
It's going to break them up, so that's not great for family and relationship bonds between the animals.
And some would like to see assurances they won't be used for breeding, which is illegal in Canada. Still, the experts we talked to all think Ottawa will give the proposal the green light, given the options that remain. John Venavelli-Rao, CTV News, Toronto.
Well, banks are generally accustomed to dealing with a lot of bucks, but a bank in New York State had a lot of trouble handling just one. Responding to a bank robbery alarm, police discovered a large buck over the weekend that had smashed its way inside. The deer can be seen jumping around, panicked, and causing plenty of damage as it tried to find a way out. Officers were eventually able to guide it outside, where it scampered away. Not something you see every day. Still ahead, golden opportunity, how Canada is stacking up in the race for Hollywood's biggest prize. Hollywood pulled the curtain back today on the list of nominees for this year's Academy Awards. The horror film Sinners set a record with 16 nominations, but it's not the only work of art generating buzz. CTV's Andrea Case walks us through the Canadian contenders to watch out for on Oscar night.
It is the not-so-little movie that could. K-pop Demon Hunters is now a two-time Academy Award-nominated film. Co-written and co-directed by Toronto's Maggie Kang, it is the first Korean animated film to contend for an Oscar.
It's really validating for us as animation directors to see a movie be so successful.
And the chart-topping song Golden from the film will face off in the Best Original Song category. Kang, a graduate of Oakville, Ontario's Sheridan College, will be joined by another former student, Domi Shi.
Okay, come and get me.
She is nominated for her animated film, Ilio. This is her third nomination, and she's hoping to add a second Academy Award to the one she won for Best Animated Short Film, Bao, in 2018. Toronto's J. Miles Dale is no stranger to film's big night. The producer of the 2019 Oscar-winning Best Picture, The Shape of Water, is back in Best Picture contention as a producer on Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. Shot largely on Toronto's sound stages, the retelling of Mary Shelley's classic novel netted 9 nominations. 2 films from Quebec creatives will also be making the trip to Hollywood. 18 years ago, Montreal's Chris Lavie and Maciejek Szyszybow's Madame Tuteli was nominated in the Best Animated Short Film category. They return with the stop-motion fable, The Girl Who Cried Pearls. And Montreal's award-winning documentarian Alison McAlpine's Perfectly a Strangeness is up for documentary short film. The 98th Annual Academy Awards, hosted once again by Conan O'Brien, will be broadcast on March 15th, right here on CTV. Andrea Case, CTV News.
We'll see how they do. That's a snapshot of this Thursday. Heather is here tomorrow. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching and good night.
CTV National News, Canada's #1 newscast.